Hi folks, Carlson from the Pharmacy Seeds Network. I have a really special interview lined up for you here, and I was thinking about putting this on Comrades and Farms, but I think I want to keep it separate because lots of reasons, but I want this conversation to be shared far and wide with people. I really think that this will provide some different perspective for those who don't have the regenerative or sustainable perspective model in their head. It's an interview with a man named Tom Sewid. He is a First Nations member and of the Kwakwaka'wakw Nation up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and he's also a Sasquatch researcher. So if you're a non-believer in Sasquatch, you might want to check out his channel. He's going to be doing some excellent research. He's been doing and going to continue to be doing some excellent research on Sasquatch. And I know you're probably now wondering how in the heck this could possibly relate to regenerative agriculture or soil health. But believe it or not, it really does. Tom talks about his experiences, and he shares some of the First Nations wisdom with us about how they interact with the land, and about how they respect the land, and about how they even respect the Sasquatch feeding areas. And I think it's an excellent perspective on how we should interact with nature and how we should look at nature. And I think it's something that we all should be thinking about and trying to keep in our heads as we move forward into the future. It's about an interaction with the environment rather than trying to force it to be what we want it to be. It's about observing nature and interacting in a way that's not damaging. And it's amazing how abundant nature is. And if we could just change our perspective a little bit and stop thinking that we're going to hammer some resource out of nature, and instead take an appropriate amount and then let nature recover it. And nature really is the regenerative model. That's where it comes from. And you know, I heard John Kempf do a talk a while back, and he talked about sustainability. I think this is at the 2013 NOFA conference, the Northeastern Organic Farmers Association conference. That's sponsored by the NOFA organization as well as the Bionutrient Food Organization. And that conference has an excellent group of hosts every year. Maybe in the description of this video I'll share a link to the Bionutrient Food Organization. They have an archive there on their site, and you can go back and listen to these Regenerative Soil Conference speakers. And often I think they also provide slides from some of the shows, some of the conferences. Pardon me, my mind's on a million things tonight. Anyway, so it's this whole concept of like clear cutting for timber, or just bulldozing and paving things over, or even just cutting down a forest to put in soybeans or something like that. The amount of destruction that goes on in order to achieve an objective is really, it's not considered in our current model of doing things. And so I thought a First Nations perspective on interacting with the land would be an excellent insight into how they managed land and how they interacted with land and nature prior to us coming here to North America. Our Western culture is a very different model, and I think it's a very destructive model right now. And I think that as we go along, we're starting to learn to be less destructive, but I think we need to really accelerate that concept and that way of thinking. So at one point in this interview that I'm about to share with you, it's really interesting. He talks about the long-term geology. I think he talks back about 4,100 years in northwestern, in the Pacific Northwest in Vancouver, where he's from. And he talks about how that wasn't even trees then. It was actually open tundra. He talks about how their tribes, you can find deposits out in the ocean down at 250 feet of depth of where their tribes in ancient history used to go to the shore and harvest clams and shells and stuff. And it's really interesting. If you're not familiar with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, those guys were both on the Joe Rogan show, and they've done several other videos of their own. They're all over the internet, and I'll throw a couple links in the description of this video for that as well, because it's interesting. Those guys talk about some of these cities that are underwater, and I don't think it's widely accepted in in the scientific world. So I wanted to share a little bit of perspective up front on this. And so back to John Kempf and sustainability. John was talking about, how can we have sustainability if our agricultural models aren't sustainable? And currently, the majority of our agricultural models aren't sustainable. They're very high input and very toxic to the landscape, very damaging to the landscape, and they're not considering ecology or the greater impact that they're having on soil health, insect health, which equates to animal health, which, we're all part of this huge looping system. And I think Tom Sewid, when he talks about it, really makes an excellent point about how, this is our rocket ship hurling through space, and it's the only one we've got. And I know there's a lot of plans to go to Mars and conquer Mars as a new planet. Well, I'd like to suggest maybe we should straighten out what we're doing on Earth before we start going and messing with other planets. Anyway, we can't have sustainability in agriculture with the current models. So that's why we have to shift our paradigm and really be looking at regenerative agriculture. And what is regenerative agriculture at its core? It's interacting with nature in a positive way, where you're using the natural systems in the soil, in the air, in the land, and around you, and you're using them to self-amplify soils and soil health. And that equates to plant, animal, and human health later on down the food chain. So I hope you'll consider this perspective. I think this is a really interesting interview. I'm very thankful to Tom Sewid, and I will share the links to his YouTube channels and websites and stuff below. And I think you should go check him out. And if you're not aware of or familiar with Sasquatch or some of the research that's going on about Sasquatch, go check it out. And for those who don't know what a Sasquatch is, Bigfoot is another name for it. And there's a whole bunch of other names for it. And there's actually a tremendous amount of research going on. And it's something to consider. That this isn't really my area of forte. It's not something I usually talk about. I know there's a lot of criticism about these creatures existing, but I think they do exist, and I think we need to recognize it. And I really like Tom's perspective about following the food in order to study these creatures, and I like his perspective about being respectful of their territory and their food and their space. And I think we should carry that perspective into our lives and into our hearts with everything that we do, whether we're interacting with other humans or nature or soil or other animals. I think it's just the right approach to have. And you think about it, the golden rule is really what it comes down to, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, let's keep that in our minds as we go forward. And without further ado, and I'll jump off my soapbox, I'm going to share this awesome interview with Tom Sewid. Thank you, Tom, for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks for watching the Pharmacy Seeds Network.
Uh-oh.
What? You broke up for a sec.
Yeah, there you are.
Oh, okay. All right. Awesome.
Yeah, in my studio.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I like all the Sasquatch stuff. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I even got Bigfoot tracks.
Oh, you got castings. Nice.
Oh, yeah, I got everything. I've seen those bloody things over a dozen times when I lived in Bush.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I've had only two experiences. One, I found tracks one morning as a surveyor in the snow, and I was baffled by it because I didn't know anything about it at the time. And I was just like, what the heck are these huge tracks? Like, somebody's got to be playing a trick on me, And then another time I had an experience out back here, and I didn't actually see it, but I saw eye shine, but I didn't actually see it. But it grunted and growled at me, and it like I've seen a lot of animals in the woods. I've seen bears. I've seen all kinds of stuff, and I've never had that feeling of fear come over me like I did with that. I just got out of there because I didn't know what it was. And later on, I thought about it. And as I've listened to the Sasquatch Chronicles stuff, I kind of realized, like, oh, that's probably what that was.
You're gonna have to go to my podcast. You have to subscribe. It's like $10 a month, but it's I think it's for 3 months, but it's called monsterxradio.com. And
Okay.
my podcast on Monster Exclusive on there, when you subscribe, one of 4 podcasts you get is Sasquatch Island.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's the stuff you were talking about on the Sasquatch Chronicles too, about how they're on the islands like that.
Well, Sasquatch Island refers to Turtle Island, North America.
Ah, okay, okay.
Yeah, everyone has a story in North America about Sasquatches, so I call it Sasquatch Island.
Ah, okay, okay. Yeah, I knew I had picked up the Turtle Island thing. I like that name. I think that's cool.
Yeah, that's what the Indians call it.
That's awesome. So I don't know. I'm not really sure where to start. I wasn't expecting to connect this fast, but I'm really glad we did. I just would like to hear a little bit of perspective on the Native American culture about just about your like how you guys manage land and like your farming practices or your food growing practices and that kind of stuff. Can you give us a little bit of like insight on that?
Sure. Well, first off, introduction. My name is Thomas Sewid, Sewid. I'm a member of the Kwakwaka'wakw First Nation from northeastern Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada. My mother, she's full-blooded Cree First Nation from central part of Canada and the plains in Saskatchewan. But I've been brought up on the west coast where I lived all my life. And I guess the main thing I know about the farming practices per se is what I've been taught oral history from my elders and family members. And also because I've always had an inkling for history, especially our First Nations history. I've done my research through my life, I still do. And one of the things I could highly recommend is a book called Franz. It's written by Franz Boas, an ethnographer back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who interacted with our people, interviewing them. And it's called A Passage of Anthology, Franz Boas. In there, he actually interviewed some of the tribes, and he actually surveyed their plots for things like clover, camas bulbs, and he interviewed them on the different plants that they were harvesting and how they were looking after them. Like, for example, wild crab apples, which is pretty much unheard of in this modern day. But it intrigued me when I read it that we used them. So I went to my late uncle when he was alive. His name is Chief Adam Dick, and he was a Kwakwaka'wakw chief from the Wiwakai First Nation, but he was raised in the Jawe tribe of the Kwakwaka'wakw in a place that's very famous, Kinkum Inlet, the Kinkum people. And everyone knows about the book and the movie, The Owl Called My Name. Well, Adam was the character that was used in that book by the writer, and interviewing Mr. Powell, who is a minister that the book depicts in there. And I knew Mr. Powell as well before he passed back in the early 90s. But anyway, Adam was the go-to guy. And so I went to him and I said, crab apples, Adam. And oh, this is what we used them for and how we cured them and everything. So, and then he taught me. I said, well, what about the crab apples that were used like barriers in the river system for canoes so they couldn't attack our villages upriver? And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, they used to take those crabapple trees because it's almost like a hardwood, and they would, sharpen the branches up so they were like barbed wire, and they were laid across the river in staggering rows so that a canoe going upriver would have to meander and everything to get upriver, and in turn, if they had to meander and slow down and they weren't a big force like the force that hit Normandy and D-Day, well, we'd pick them off with arrows and with spears and so forth. So crab apples were used in that regard as well, aside from a food. So the best way to look at it with the Kwakwaka'wakw tribe, it's all about seasonal harvest. So the highest concentration of seasonal protein that our people could harvest, cure, however they were going to do it, so they could use it throughout the year. And that's the same formula I use to equate where Sasquatch would be. And I run the Facebook group, the podcast series, the YouTube channel, and the television production operations called Sasquatch Island. And so what I'm doing is trying to find Sasquatch. Where are they going to be? So let's start in the beginning of the year when the first vitamin C comes up. So our people would be living in their villages, which would be winter villages. And they lived there because they were sheltered from the southeast storms. If they were on an inlet, a fjord, they were living with their back to the outflow winter winds called outflows that would roar down, so they wouldn't get that cold because they had trees behind them and the slope of an island or the mainland. And then their canoes wouldn't be damaged on the beaches because the winter villages generally had islets in front of them. And that's where the entire tribe would converge for the winter time for shellfish and to celebrate the great ceremonies of potlatch. They would have their winter feasts and winter ceremonials. So it was a time of abundance, the winter time, where most people look at winter as a starvation time. The Kwakwaka'wakw and other Pacific Northwest coastal tribes, because we had so much nutrients that we could seasonally harvest, we were able to sun dry it, smoke it, put it in boxes with what we call klitna in my tribe, ooligan oil. So this oil that was derived from the ooligan fish, we would put it in bentwood cedar boxes, and we would put things in there like salmon berries or thimbleberries, herring eggs, and it would keep it cured like jarring, so you could eat it year round. So let's get back to the spring. You lived your winter eating your clams and shellfish and shelter from the fierce winter winds and hurricanes. You've had seasonal abundance and feasts that you're eating all of this cured food that's coming out of the bentwood cedar boxes, which we call gildas. And all of a sudden the green starts to sprout. The first greenery that sprouts up for our people to eat for vitamin C would be salmonberry sprouts. And those new shoots, you break them, they got thorns on them, you just feel where the stem wants to not bend too easy, and that's where you snap it because it's woody below that. You peel off the burgundy skin with the thorns and the green leaves, and you're left with a shoot that's, anywhere from 4 inches to 18 inches long. Some of them as robust as my finger I'm sticking up, and it's the color of celery, but it's not stringy like celery. It's a shoot, it's a sprout, and you eat that. When I was a kid, we used to bring sugar into the forest, and I guess it's usually around May, and we'd pick the sprouts in late April, early May, and we'd dip it in sugar and eat it. It's Indian candy. Later on, that salmonberry sprout, the berries will start coming out, which is your salmonberry. Red, purple, yellow, almost blue, and it looks like salmon eggs, and that's your next vitamin C. And so if you look at it as wild salmon berries that aren't hit by deer or any other ungulate, and humans aren't hitting it either, you'll notice that those salmon berries don't grow as lush. And I guess it's to do with us and the animals going in and eating those fresh shoots. It makes those plants grow all that much more better because there's more sunlight and more nutrients for each stem, which makes more berries. So eating the sprouts, we knew that it would also benefit a few weeks down the road when the berries would come out because there'd be more of them and they'd get more sunlight. The next one you get would be your thimbleberries. That's usually around June. And later on in June, the huckleberries come out and the high bush blueberries come out in midsummer to late summer. The Salal berries, which usually lasts until mid-October, it's purple, kind of like a blueberry. So you have all these different berries that we harvested. But what you would do with them is you'd smash them into a paste, and you would take the fronds of bull kelp, and you would lay the bull kelp fronds, which is flat like a lasagna noodle, but some, I guess, 20 feet long, the long ones. And you put
Wow.
your berry paste on there and you dry it in the sun. And as it dries, you peel off the berry strip from the bull kelp frond. You flip it over in a flat rock, you dry it even more, and then you roll it up and cut it, and you end up with these little fruit roll-ups. You didn't know that the Kwakwaka'wakw people invented the fruit roll-up. Well, there you go. Well, those fruit roll-ups, those of the berries, and they would mix it with other things as well. I imagine they would even make pemmican with meat and oil, because we had seal oil, whale oil, and ooligan oil, and bear oil, so bear grease. So you would mix it up and you would put the rolls in these bentwood boxes or these cakes. And that's where in the wintertime you would have that vitamin C so you didn't get sick. And also when you had the berry feasts and the different things, Salal berry feasts, salmon berries were used a lot too. So there's all your berries and how we used them. I guess you got to remember Pacific Northwest, we're people of the sea, the salmon. And I had another Facebook group, Pacific Balance Marine Management. I'm the president of a group of 8 First Nations here in British Columbia that are pushing our Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans, aka DFO, equivalent to the U.S. Fish and Game. And we're pushing them to give us license so that under our traditional food social ceremonial harvest, we're able to sell our seal products, meat, oils, meat, blubber, bones, whatever. So with that, though, it shows that we're tied to the ocean. And the farming in the oceans, well, I have to go with number one, lochiways, clam gardens. So if you Google clam gardens, you'll come up with Chief Adam Dick. And he did a video a number of years ago and opened the door to clam gardens. I was actually approached because someone gave me a report that some scientists came up to the Broughton Archipelago, the Kwakwaka'wakw territories in the summertime, and they saw these beaches that had stone walls at low tide, and they had areas that was decobbled and debouldered, and they were like, how come this is happening? It must be kelp fixing their roots on there and growing. They become buoyant and they lift the rock up, and waves and tide bring them to a beach, and they die, and the rocks end up in these rock walls. Well, I read this report, rolled my eyes, and shook my head, and silly buggers, majos with those mamacha. What's wrong with those white people? I read. I looked at my friend, and I said, Billy, and then Billy Proctor from Echo Bay, an elder that's still with us, non-native guy that grew up out there. But I said, what's wrong with them, Billy? They're dummies. Those are what we call lochiways, clam gardens. And our people used to go to the beaches, and we know that when you clam dig, if you don't dig the beach constantly, it gets sediment heavy and it becomes like mud and clay, and the clams die. So we know that you got to dig that beach, constantly be in there with your digging stick in the old days, your clam gun now, which is a 4 or 5 tonged scoop, but you dig the beach and you make it fluffy like oatmeal, and that way the clams proliferate. And then all of a sudden you're digging clams, you come across a rock, you pick it up, you walk down the beach to one of the berms, one of the walls. Some of them are 90 degrees, and you throw it in the wall. So we're always been adding to those rock walls, the boulders, and in turn, no boulders on the beach makes those shellfish, the bivalves, proliferate. Your native little necks, your butter clam, horse clam, your cockle, and at the really extreme low parts of the beach that's exposed at a 0 or a minus tide, you'll find gooey ducks. So the big clams, they've got protein in them, probably 5 to 7 pounds of protein in one clam, called a gooey duck. So the lochiway, the clam garden, that was our big way of, I don't know if the term agriculture would fit. We would probably more likely use, but that was a farming process that we still do to this day. I'll be going out here in the wintertime to get my clams and do some seal harvesting. And while I'm out there digging clams, I will be adding stone to the walls, the lochiways, just like my ancestors done since the dawn of our creation. And then the other one would be seaweed, cluckastun, sea lettuce. black. You can look at a book to the cultural center of ours online called Umista, umista.ca, umista.ca. You go there and you go to the gift shop. They sell a book called Kwakwaka'wakw Traditional Foods. It covers all of our traditional foods, right from the marine resources to the land, to the forest, to the alpines. And the sea lettuce, cluckastun, was used by our people quite a bit. We would even go so far as to take hemlock boughs in March and cut them off the trees, put them in the water, which we still do, and tie them to a rock at low tide. And when the high tide comes, the herring come in March and April and spawn. And you're left with these clumps of herring eggs called a'at in my language. That's all over the branches of the hemlock. And our hemlock, unlike Shakespeare's hemlock, isn't poison. So you can boil it and eat it, hemlock needles and all. It's an evergreen. So there's another type of food, I guess you could say, we farmed as well. And when you do look at the culture of the Kwakwaka'wakw people and how I equate it to the Sasquatches, the other tribe I call them, the humans of the night, because they are nocturnal, they're larger than humans, covered in hair, bipedal, more robust. Well, let's go back 4,600 years ago. The cedar trees and other evergreens and the shellfish just began to proliferate in the British Columbia coast and Washington State area. So we know through the pollen records that pre-4,600 years ago, the Pacific Northwest was like living in Barrow, Alaska nowadays. There was tundra, there was scrub, there was even caribou running around what used to be called the Queen Charlotte Islands, which we call Haida Gwaii now, in northern British Columbia's coast. Well, up until 1909 when the last one was hunted out. But looking at that pollen record, we know that it was very harsh to live here. We have archaeological carbon dates that go back 10,000, 12,000 years. What was it like 12,000 years ago at present sea level state? Well, number one, it was bloody cold. It was an ice age that was just tapering off. But if you look at the ice age some 24,000 years ago, the ice caps on the northern hemisphere were up to a mile thick. Well, put a sponge in a cookie sheet filled with water, a dry sponge. Squeeze the sponge and let it absorb the water in the cookie sheet. And now it becomes dry. Well, that was the glaciation of the ice ages. So with a mile thick ice cap on the northern hemisphere, if you look at Google Earth and you look at Vancouver Island, you're going to see these ancient riverbeds under 6,000 feet of water right now that went out far into what we call the Pacific Ocean. Back in the day, if you can get down there with a submarine and get out and do your archaeological sampling, you're going to find that that's where the villages were some 25, 50,000, 100,000 years ago. You'll find stones with carvings, petroglyphs. You'll find the shell evidence, and you'll find stone tools as they have in some dredging operations of 240 feet in Haida Gwaii a few years ago on the eastern shore. And it was carbon dated at some 24,000 years. So what was actually going on where we live now at present sea state was actually alpines. It was high mountains. So to find the ancient stuff is going to be further down. So looking at all that, the Kwakwaka'wakw people in our oral history and some written, it said that if you went into someone else's berry patch, clover patch, camas root patch, salal berry patch, fishing spot on a river for salmon or ooligans or sturgeon, or even in someone's beach area where they would do barnacle harvesting and different things, you could get killed. You were stealing their food. You were, in essence, wishing them to die. So there was no retaliation to you physically or hurting someone who was in your harvest area or killing them. There was no retribution to your family or yourself. So equating that into the Sasquatch equation, 6,500 years ago, when it was harsh like Barrow, Alaska, and the shellfish were just starting to grow in the evergreens and berry patches. And all of a sudden, you see a Sasquatch harvesting your food. Humans with weapons, fire, and mass in the daylight would kill them. So, in turn, that's why the Sasquatches evolved to become the bipedal creatures of the night, nocturnal, no humans. They weren't seen, they weren't heard. And then, in turn, we see how there's that low water in the daytime. You see us Indians out there harvesting shellfish and non-Indians. Well, at nighttime at 2 in the morning, some of us still go dig at that time of the night, but we hear the Sasquatches. We even see their sign. We go to a beach. We're taught that as soon as you go to a beach, you have to stop, look around, and if you see broken cockle shells, it's the Sasquatch telling you, which we call chunakwa, we're harvesting here right now at nighttime. So you get in your boat and you go a mile one of the directions away from there. Go to the beach, look around, no shells, you harvest there. It's respect. How the Kwakwaka'wakw and the Sasquatches are respecting one another in harvest of the proteins that are at hand. You're picking berries and you hear a tree shake or something's thrown at you, or you hear a tree knock, boom, boom, boom. You stop, turn around, and go back where you came from. The Sasquatch is telling you, I'm harvesting these berries right now. So even in this modern day of 2020 with the white man's magic, a computer where I can talk to you in New York across Turtle Island, continent of North America, which I call Sasquatch Island, it's nice to know that the ancestral ancient ways between humans and Sasquatch are still being practiced and respecting one another to this day. And that's what it's all about, respect. In northern British Columbia, some of the native peoples harvest the pine mushroom for commercial sales. They still have their clan and family tribal territories. You don't just pull over on the side of a logging road and go picking pine mushrooms. You have to have permission to go in there. Even myself, if I want to go harvest foods up in the head of Knight's Inlet, I have to parlay in protocol and get permission from the Danakhtau tribe. And even though my tribe has rights and title in that overlapped territory, respectfully, I have to go to the Danakhtau's chiefs and ask permission. They grant me permission, I can go up there and harvest. So there you go. There's basically how the Kwakwaka'wakw are doing things.
It sounds like a lot like, like our modern day thing is about, you don't just go on somebody's property and start, digging on their farm or hunting on their land. I mean, it sounds very similar. It's just, seems like a much more respectful approach both to nature and to other, tribes and animals too, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, I don't think we should forget about the tree of life, the cedar tree, Thuja placata in Latin.
Please tell us about that.
The cedar tree is, in June, July, we peel the red cedar bark off a tree about that thick in diameter. You go up to the tree and you ask permission and thank it, and then you peel only 1/3 of the bark. No more than that. You kill the tree. And you can peel again a few years down the road, another third of the tree. But you never take more than 2/3. And that tree will always grow. And as tree, some 600 years old, 15 feet in diameter, you can see the cat face, the scar where they peeled that bark 640 years ago. And we can age class when those people were doing that by that standing living tree. So the cedar was everything to us. It was our cotton. It was used to weave mats, baskets, blankets, clothing, sandals, sails for our canoes. And then the tree itself was utilized for everything. When you were born, took cedar bark silk and they would pound it, make it like corn husk. When the newborn baby was born, they'd rub it down with cedar bark silk to clean it, give it a nice copper color. They were infusing that baby with cedar oils. If that baby was born allergic to red cedar, it would die. You were weeding out the weak with the tree of life, because how the heck are you going to live if you're a First Nation in the Pacific Northwest coastal region when your whole life, your canoes, your home, your poles, your masts, your utensils, your sticks for putting fish and meat to smoke, the boxes you put your meat and fish and berries in that are bentwood boxes out of red cedar, everything's cedar. And when you died, you were put in a bent cedar box and placed in a cave, a catacomb, or a platform in a tree, or on an island made of cedar bark, a little house. So everything about your life is all based on cedar, the tree of life. And you'll see it on our button blankets. And if anyone's interested, I can send them pictures of a button blanket my mother made for First Nations medicine woman, and it's the tree of life on the back and button design. So hopefully I've shared a little bit with you guys. I'm sorry, but I got to go. I got another appointment here in 10 minutes. But as soon as the phone rings, I'll say goodbye, but we can keep talking until then.
Awesome. Well, wow, that is an awesome perspective on things that I knew the cedar tree had so many uses, but I didn't realize it had that many uses, and that it was that ingrained in the culture. It's such a beautiful perspective on things too. That even the rubbing the baby with the cedar bark for the cedar oil, and if you, like you say, if you can't survive it, then it's not going to survive in a world that's basically revolves around the cedar, the tree of life, right? Like, it's amazing how much in our Western culture we try to like save the weak, and that might sound harsh, but like if you can't survive the first 6 months, you're sure as heck not going to do very well for the next 60, 70, 80 years, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like one of the ones I didn't talk about was camas bulb. They have a purple flower in May. That one they're starting to do a lot of ongoing studies with, because they're finding that invasive species like broom, knotweed, hogweed, Himalayan blackberry, they're taking over the traditional berry patches and camas bulb areas. Like here in Seattle area, I live in Kent, Washington part-time. When I'm not up in Canada living and working. Excuse me. But the Himalayan blackberry down here, it's just everywhere. I can't find huckleberries or salmon berries or, it's just blackberries, Himalayan blackberry, and it's just everywhere. And there's some areas that in what they call the Puget Sound, Gulf Islands, San Juan Islands, it's almost a semi-arid climate out there because of the rain shadows and everything. But those islands used to be just filled with camas bulb and other things. Now they're covered in Himalayan blackberry and broom. So we have to really look at that. Everyone plants their gardens, and I'm doing a landscaping contract right now for some people, and I think about it when we go to the plant shops. I'm like, God dang, we humans are the dumbest parasite on this whole planet. We're just,
aren't we ever?
Oh, well, us Indians, we say the white people, the worst invasive species in North America.
Well,
I'm just kidding. No, get mad.
No. That's the reality of it. Like, we came here, and I look at the damage we've done here in the United States in 250 years, and it's like this is an entirely different landscape. Out in the Midwest, there were 8 feet of that nice dark humic topsoil, and we killed it in I don't know, 40, 50, 60 years. We turned it from topsoil that was grazed rotationally by the bison. We came in and killed it and turned it into a dust bowl, and about killed ourselves and the entire landscape. So that's why I'm interested in the Native American perspective on it, or the First Nations perspective on it, because you guys were here for thousands of years, caring for the land and interacting with it and respecting it. And I think it's something we need to hold in perspective as we go forward into the future with regenerative agriculture, and start changing our practices and our interaction with the land, and have more respect for nature.
Oh, absolutely. That's one reason why I'm trying to find conclusive proof of the existence of Sasquatch with many others. Because back in the 1970s, when that commercial was going to North America of that Indian getting out of his birch bark canoe and seeing urban sprawl, gridlock on a freeway, pollution, effluent, dead fish. At the end of the commercial, you see the tear go down his cheek and his buckskins. Well, it resonated with people, so the green push started. But now we've forgotten that. Sure, we have green parties and we have this recycling and all this other stuff. My wife does all that stuff, drives me crazy. But anyway, what's our last hope? The last vestige to something that was perfect and pure and a balanced ecosystem all around us was the Indian, is the Sasquatch. A lot of us Indians I'm to blame. I'm a commercial fisherman by trade, 45 years. I've killed millions of fish and mammals and bird life, so I'm a big part of the whole equation of destruction.
Right, but
But at the same turn, if we look at the Sasquatch, I think thousands of years ago, the chiefs sat there and said, look at these 90-degree corners. Look at this clothing we're wearing now. Look at these mortars and pestles out of stone and these arrowheads and harpoon heads. And look at the jealousy, the animosity, the hate, the warfare, the sloth. This is not what the Kwakwaka'wakw, the creator, wanted. He wanted us to be more in harmony with Mother Earth and nature. And I believe those chiefs ordered their families to drop all their clothes and possessions and walk out into the night and live that pure life. And we're seeing it with the Sasquatches called Sitonga in the Omaha Indian Reservation with the investigations I'm doing there off and on pre-COVID. We're seeing that they are Sitonga, keepers of the medicine. And there's medicine woman. She is actually still interacting with Sasquatches as our ancestors have always done. So there is that bridge. And I think once we find the conclusive proof of Sasquatch, we're finally, as mankind, going to sit back and go, just like we did with marbled murrelets and spotted owls, we have to protect hundreds of millions of hectares for the Sasquatch's world. And in turn, we're going to be able to say, maybe it's not a good idea to frack all that or develop the North Slope, and maybe we shouldn't clear cut all of that forest or prairie ground for condominiums and so forth. And we all see the scientific stories and paintings and pictures of cities under glass bubbles. We don't smarten up, we're going to end up like that. Because this spaceship we're on right now, going through the solar systems and the universe, this is our only ship we have. And, sure, we're going to be in March, but they say by the end of 2025. But, maybe this Kwakwaka'wakw, the creator, sent COVID-19 for a reason. He wants to thin the herd, let the strong survive, and learn from our mistakes.
It's funny, you can harvest sustainably and still take a tremendous amount of resource off of the land without doing damage, right? Like you talked about the salmonberry, how you could break off the top of that and it made it grow stronger, and how the clams wouldn't happen to the beach without your digging. That interaction is integral, but it's not this damaging like fist slam thing that we do with our Western culture. We come in and clear cut an entire area. It's a whole different mentality entirely, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And do I have hope for humankind? No. We're the dumbest parasite on this planet, and we'll just earth first. We'll go log, frack, pipeline, fish farm, clear cut, subdivide another planet later. But earth first, we got to ruin this one first. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. But
wow.
I better run here. I got a meeting going to start here on another phone line.
Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate your insight. And can I follow up with you through email to talk to let me find her name again.
Dr. Jennifer Grenz, Grenz. She's one of my directors on Pacific Balance Marine Management for the seal and sea lion harvest. But she's the go-to person for Western Canada's governments for invasive species control. That's her area of expertise right now that she does during spring and summer. And she's also works as a teacher for University of British Columbia and plant and botany and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
She's definitely worth talking to. She's a real brainiac, that one. And she's native, so she bridges both academia to the ancient ways. Drives her crazy, academia, but she's doing a good job.
I'll bet. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate your time and your insight, and I hope this resonates with people and we can maybe stop doing so much damage to our planet.
Oh, yeah. And if anyone wants to go to my banner up there, it says SasquatchIsland.com. There's one of my designs behind me on that side there. But, by all means, come on board and check it out, and it's pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah. And plug your YouTube channel and anything else. How else can people get in touch with you?
YouTube, I already said it all. Sasquatch Island, Seasons of the Sasquatch, another YouTube channel. That's all about, we're doing a TV series in production right now on what I said in the beginning of this podcast, the seasonal high concentration of proteins that can be easily and readily harvested by Sasquatches to fill their belly and carry off for their daytime sleep. and share with their clans. So it helps to increase, winter, it's beginning of November. Should I be up in the logging roads where there's snow on the ground looking for Sasquatch? No, they ain't up there. They're down in the shellfish beds in the salmon rivers right now.
Like
And
anything else, you follow
yeah,
the food, right?
follow the food. But I thank you all very much.
Thank
And
you too, Tom.
thank
Appreciate
you for
it.
having me on. And in my language, halakilasla. Go in peace.
Halakilisla. Much respect. Take care.
Yeah.
All right.